In the heart of Brooklyn, New York, a group of children are being given an opportunity to participate in what is perhaps the most common experience known to every growing child, attending school. What makes it unique is that these children have been classified as non-educable. They have been excluded from every school, every agency. Some have been recommended for custodial care, for referral to a state institution. Yet here, each child, regardless of handicap, is given a chance to live as normal a childhood as is possible.
When we started, we were criticized for running a day school. I remember when Bruno Bettelheim was a discussant, and he said, "It looks like a very good program, Dr. Fenichel, but it's not going to work in a million years because your children are going to be coming home at the end of the day to the very parents who caused the illness. And everything you do at the league school, positive as it may be, is going to be undone by the parents." And yet I, in working at Kings County Hospital, recognized the fact that so many of these parents wanted to hold on to their kids. And I felt that it's possible for these kids to be helped in the day school setting. It was the first day school for severely disturbed children. There were other residential units, and many doctors had recommended residential units to separate the child from the family that had created the pathology. When we first started the school, we thought we knew the kind of kids we were getting because we read all the textbooks about the schizophrenic child, the autistic child, the symbiotic child, and there were specific characteristics that were supposed to be typical of these kids. It didn't take us too long before we began to recognize that these labels were really meaningless, and that no two of these kids were alike. And their pathology, as well as their potentials and their strengths and their learning styles, vary from one extreme to the other in every area. In the area of intellectual functioning, we have some kids who, when they come here, function like 2 or 3 year olds.
I don't want to hear twang noises.
And then you have some kids who have a combination of retardation and fairly good intellectual functioning existing simultaneously.
It must be this picture.
Oh, because every galaxy is in this picture.
Not every galaxy. A very little bit. You see, there is an infinity amount of galaxies because the universe is very big. It goes forever.
We have many kids who, when they come here, have no language. And then we have some who have language, but they don't use it to communicate. And behaviorally, too, there is no one particular style of behavior that these kids have. There are those who come here and they will just sit like vegetables and stare into space, very lethargic, very listless. And there are others who will spend their time just rocking back and forth, but very quiet. And then at the other extreme, you get those who are on a perennial merry-go-round. They're hopped up, they're like automobiles out of control. And just getting them to sit or make eye contact is an impossible task when they come here. Well, and you know, we recognize very early that the emotional disorders that our kids have, and they're pretty severe, were the result not of their parents, but of their own learning disabilities. And more we recognize the need to really strengthen the cognitive areas of these kids. And we felt that maybe education can. We weren't sure, but we started with a hypothesis and the hope that maybe special education can do things for these children that psychotherapy had not been able to do.
5 times 8 or 8 times 5?
In structuring a system that would employ the process of education as the chief therapeutic tool, Dr. Fenichel organized the program around the classroom teacher. The teacher, in effect, became the child's key therapeutic agent. And supporting the teacher, a wide range of clinical specialists who come into contact with a child almost on a daily basis.
Okay.
Collectively,
Harold.
they afford the child a specific remedial program designed around a therapeutic philosophy called the psychoeducational approach. Once a child is selected, he is brought in for a clinical evaluation. This evaluation will be the basis for planning the child's individual program, as well as the specific remediations required to strengthen weaknesses and overcome disabilities. One of the most important phases of the initial evaluation is what the teacher herself observes.
I program for my kids by carefully reviewing the records we keep at the league school before ever seeing the child. And then I talk with the social workers, the language therapists, and anyone who has contact with the child.
I know for a fact that there are many institutions where a teacher isn't allowed to look at clinical records, even though she's working with the kids regularly, because the feeling is that she's not a clinician, and she wouldn't understand, and it may be dangerous to give her this information. Now, we don't have that feeling for a teacher. We feel, and we don't just give lip service to it, that the teacher is the chief therapeutic agent.
Then on the first day of school, each child comes in for 1 hour, and that 1 hour is spent exploring some of the things the child can do. For instance, I put out various games and activities to get a feeling on how the child learns, how he plays, how he talks, how he interacts socially, and what his behavioral problems are.
A purple square.
Square.
We planned maybe for the first month or month and a half to try and make it into, to try and organize the children into a group so that they're cohesive, while at the same time exploring the areas that we will work into as the year progresses. We try and determine, what will be the emphasis, say, for the first couple of months after the initial introduction into the class routine.
The children in the league school are divided into 3 broad groups, or units, according to their general ability to function. Each unit further classifies the children, sorting them into subgroups or actual classrooms. Generally, 2 teachers are assigned to each room. Usually 6 to 8 students are placed in a single class, creating a favorable teacher-pupil ratio of 1 to 3 or 1 to 4. Each unit is administered by an educational supervisor, herself a teacher. She is responsible for the overall functioning of her unit, including placement of teachers, grouping and matching of children, and the continual moving of children from one developmental stage to the next. Administratively, the educational supervisors are responsible to the director of league school. Most problems not directly involving educational principles are handled by the assistant director. Supporting the teacher on a day-to-day basis is a large staff of clinicians. This includes a chief psychiatric social worker and a staff of social workers. They are the parents' main contact with the school, and in this capacity, interpret to the parents what goes on in the classroom, and of equal importance, report to the teachers what is happening with the child at home. A chief psychologist and her staff of psychologists ascertain the developmental level of the child, the whole child, the strengths as well as the weaknesses. Their clinical evaluations are an ongoing part of the psychoeducational process.
Yeah, I know. I hear the children.
A staff of speech and language specialists works constantly with the 3 units. Their role is twofold: to give the teachers specific suggestions on how to use the day-to-day activities of the child to stimulate language development and growth, and how to blend these suggestions in with her general class routine. Second, depending upon the child's needs, to carry out a program of individual tutoring.
Where do you live?
The educational supervisor coordinates the services the clinicians provide to the teachers in her unit, and at the same time channel the information flow from the teachers back to the clinicians. Although the psychoeducational philosophy remains the same throughout the 3 units, the academic, social, and emotional requirements of the student population varies considerably. The basic needs of each child range from self-managing skills, impulse control, motor development, all the way through higher academic achievements that will prepare them to move on to the public school system. To accomplish this, Each unit and each classroom has a population of a different developmental level, and each holds a different expectation for the child's future.
First of all, I'd like to say that the children in Unit 1 are children who were never admitted to public school. Maybe they had one day in kindergarten or something, and it was very obvious that he was a child who would not be able to function within the public school system. Our children are the lowest functioning children in the school.
Within Unit 1 is the transitional room. Most children who are accepted into the League school start here. This is their first group experience, and the emphasis is on socialization, shaping the child's ability to function within a group, relating to other children, develop a sense of their own identity.
Our emphasis is on socialization. I'm trying to make the children aware of themselves and aware of each other. And we do a lot of sensory motor activities because the children are children who as such have not moved around a lot and they're not aware of their bodies. And so we do a lot of work in this area.
Now.
And it goes worth how much money, Debbie?
The criteria for admission into Unit 2 is a potential for intellectual functioning, a readiness to relate meaningfully to a teacher.
Come on, Debbie. Right, 25 cents above the quarter. And 5 cents above the nickel.
It's 25.
The goal for Unit 2 is to give each child the readiness to move out of League school and into a community setting appropriate for his potential. Or in other words, prepare him for his own individual mainstream. Unit 2 curriculum fosters mobility, traveling, a sense of the outside world. They learn public transportation systems, how to shop at community stores, how to make phone calls from a public booth. In short, how to be self-sufficient.
Okay, Alan's hand was first. Alan?
Unit 3, as in all other units, possesses a character, a tone, all its own. It is the only unit in which departmentalization is structured into the curriculum: English, math, civics, sciences, and social studies.
The children in Unit 3 are the oldest children in the school in the sense of their ability to function. They do have language in some degree. Some of them are very verbal. Some of them are minimally verbal, but they do communicate. They have all kinds of communication skills, even if they're deficient. But they're aware of people, and they do communicate with people, and they have social interests.
Well, Saturday, I woke up, took out my cat for the first time, took him down to the park, played with him until 12 o'clock, rolled the ball, he went after it, hit the ball right through the fence, hit the grass, over the fence, and he went boom, went gone, goodbye. That was the end of that ball. Went boom, right down the sewer. So I got another one when I went over to my Aunt Bernadette's.
End of the ball, but not the end of the cat, right?
Right.
Right.
I almost killed him one.
You were angry at him, huh?
No! But I never knew that cat could hit a home run.
I think perhaps the most characteristic thing about the children in Unit 3 is that the largest group, the majority of the children in the unit, have been to public school. They were known to agencies, many of them, before they came to the League school. They were failing in the school situation, and they were failing in the home situation. The schools found them incorrigible. If they're in a double bind and we're in a double bind, we say to them, come to us, you know, we want you. We're not like the other schools. We want you. We'll help you. We'll nourish you psychologically. We'll nourish you emotionally. We'll support you. And we find many of our kids are saying, we don't want your help. We don't want to be in this school. Being this school is an everyday reminder of our misery and our deficit and our difference.
That's it. It's got a brush back. It's not a pick. That's it. Keep it going now. Keep the rhythm. Stay with the same chord. Just a minute. Boom. That's it.
Continuous communication among clinicians, educational supervisors, and teachers is vital. Supplementing the more formal conferences are a seemingly never-ending series of spontaneous exchanges.
That I was trying to describe to you.
I know.
That we see a great deal in the classroom, and this was a major concern of mine.
Jean noticed a lot of tongue biting and cheek biting during the math lesson, and she looked inside his mouth, and there was lots of indication of his having chewed on the insides of his cheek. Sort of nervous activity.
We'll have to check with our previous information on him to see whether this is typical or whether this is a new development.
And doing what we're thinking is not necessarily okay.
What was her response to the division between reality and
Well,
fantasy?
initially,
The professional relationships among the League School clinicians differs markedly from those normally experienced by their colleagues serving the community.
Now, at League School, you see the children every day and you see the teachers, and what you write down in your report has to make sense because people will read it and they'll question you. And so your job doesn't end with seeing the child and writing a report. The job continues on in an ongoing way.
Another point, Mary, the difficulties and rewards of working here. The difficulties are greatly connected to exactly what you've said, that you have very close and intimate contact with the children and the teachers, and should your judgment be less than infallible, which it can be, why then it smacks you right in the face maybe a year or two later, and you find out that you were in error in your prediction or in your suggestion.
We, as staff, kind of move together and interchange our positions. It's not unusual for an educational supervisor to meet with a mother and discuss some of the things that are happening in the classroom in a social work way, or for me to meet with a teacher and discuss with the teacher some of the things that I have seen at home in an educational supervisory way. I think the way that this can be done is because we all have respect for each other's areas of skill and information, and we share it and exchange it.
I think it's important for a teacher not to conceive of herself as a miracle worker, but to recognize that in working with children like ours, any success that's going to take place isn't going to be instant. It's not going to be immediate, and that progress is going to be very, very slow. They have to have the patience to recognize this, and they also have to be familiar and not be threatened by failure. They're going to have their failures as well as their successes.
The mother was told that this child would never be functional, that she'd be a vegetable, and that she should never think of anything except institutionalization. And the child's mother could not accept this and pursued other remedies.
Periodically, all the clinicians and teachers who are involved with a child meet as a part of the ongoing psychoeducational assessment. They pool their observations, consider new short-term goals, perhaps reevaluate their initial assessment.
Is she really changing? Does anybody have any feeling, someone who's known her over a period of time?
Oh, I feel like she's changing very definitely. She has experienced something that has truly delighted her or truly surprised her, and there's been a look on her face that is so genuine and so real that you know that she's really experiencing strong feelings inside of her. And I had never seen anything like that last year.
But we do recognize that this is far from being a precise science, that you can't really isolate the disability as well as we'd like to think you can, and that often we have to scrap much of what we put down as part of an assessment. That's why I've always stressed the fact that a psychoeducational assessment is an ongoing thing. You could have the most wonderful and most gifted and most highly trained psychiatrists, psychologists, neurologists, language therapists make an evaluation on a child. They're not coming up with all the answers.
When he's picked
What
on
I
us,
want to know is when a bunch of kids gang up on your child, really unmercifully, like the other day they wrecked his bike on him. But luckily my husband was able to fix it. What are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to run out like a nut and scream at all the kids? Or what? We don't know how to handle it.
There was one kid that was abusing Mark, that was making fun of him. And you know what the ironic part of this? He has a brother that has a problem also.
Cerebral palsy.
It's always the way.
Here is the child that has a brother with a problem. Wouldn't you think that he'd be a little more sympathetic?
Parents meet in small groups regularly. Shepherded by the social worker, they discover that their problems are not unique, nor do they stand alone in facing their dilemmas and heartbreaks.
He said to Stuart, my brother isn't as bad. Your brother's worse than my brother.
You either prepare him or else forget it.
Well, we were only able to help with a little part of that.
No, I'm not talking about
some
that.
activities in the home.
Yeah.
Working the school.
No, I'm talking about on the street.
That's a
You
hard
can't
one.
prepare him for the street in here.
That's a hard one for him.
If we want to take him anywhere, we got to tell him a week before we go, or else
What class
it's
is
going to
he
be
in?
miserable.
One of the problems that our parents always face is living with a disturbed child who's so obviously very different from other children in a community. The experience of trying to go to a playground and have the children meet and play with other children can be a very painful one for our parents. And sometimes we've even had a situation in which a parent and a teacher will take a child for his first bus ride, and the teacher and parent somehow share together the looks that other people riding the bus will give the child.
That affects everything. The kids are, the kids are out in groves, and you can see, in the spring you can see how children have grown that you haven't seen all year round. And my son has grown along with the rest, but mentally he hasn't, He still has a functional difficulty in the neighborhood. And the younger kids, 4 years old, Sunday there was an incident with 4-year-olds, can goof on him,
What do you mean goof?
Goof, make him the joke, and he's gullible, my son is, you tell him something, he'll believe you.
The greater tragedy lies with the families still on the waiting list. There is always a greater demand for services than there is classroom space.
Well, I certainly wouldn't want to expand this place beyond where we've gone already, because I do think we'd fall into the trap of so many of these institutions that have become so large that they lose the human touch, where very few people know what's happening all through the building. And I'd rather see many smaller settings along these lines than to expand this place and have 2 or 3 large settings. Absolutely. I feel very strongly about the need for small places where everyone knows everyone else in the school. However, there's certainly a need for expansion of services, for a whole network of services to take care of some of our children who we keep here because there are no available facilities in the community for them.
We're always available to you if you want to call us in between, because we know it's hard to wait.
The League School does offer a measure of help to those families still on the waiting list, and its provisions are explained by the social worker when the parent first applies.
We do offer you another program for a very young child that's primarily geared to helping you understand what his problem is and working with him at home. That's a program at which the parent would bring the child to our school once a week for an hour a week.
The home training program has its own staff of teachers who demonstrate for 1 hour a week training and educational techniques, including behavior modification and self-managing skills, which the parent can easily incorporate into the family routine at home. In all its programs, its units, its individual classrooms, League School has one main thrust: to prepare each child to enter that particular mainstream that represents his maximum potential.
We'd like to get them all into regular classes, but we know this is pretty unrealistic. We do get some who go on to regular classes in the public schools and then move on to elementary, junior high, high school, and some have even gone on to college. But we also have many children who go from here to special classes in the public schools. The classes for the brain injured, classes for the retarded, the trainable, or the educable. And we make it our business to see to it that if a child is going to be institutionalized, he's going to be at least self-managing. He's going to be able to dress himself, toilet himself, feed himself. And this may be all that we can do with another child. But this may be as great an achievement for this particular child as getting another child into college.
This has been a brief introductory look at one highly successful approach towards helping handicapped children realize their maximum potential. The program's central philosophy is to make the classroom teacher the primary therapeutic agent, and, through the teacher, give the child an educational prescription, a unique blending of specific remediations prescribed by specialists who have diagnosed the child and who continue to observe and reevaluate their findings. The emphasis, always, is upon creating as normal a childhood experience as possible, to minimize the child's impression that he is somehow not like others, to give him the mobility, the familiarity with the outside world, and the skills needed to function as normally as possible to the fullest extent of his abilities.